A very sensitive issue, unfortunately, that highlights, I suppose, the realities of unemployment, having 9 million people in South Africa unemployed, and also being retrenched as the shrinking mining sector continues to be a rather thorn in the flesh for our economy as well. And so, as you can see, Sunday, it's been a very difficult one this to actually challenge. So we are very much glad to have in studio with us people who will help us unpack this particular story. We've got Eric Gilichana, who is from the NUM Health and Safety Secretary. We've got Sfiso Dladla, who is Mining and Extractives Projects Manager at Action Aid. And also on the line, we have David van Wyk, who is a mining expert. Gentlemen, top of the evening and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good evening.
Let's just start with this issue of legalizing illegal mining. And we've seen the deaths. It is a very tragic moment, not just for the country, but for the people who come from different countries as well, who are affiliated to South Africa as well. Where does this problem actually come from? Maybe we start with you, Sfiso, that you can explain to us.
Thank you for having me, and good evening to your viewers. I think the problem starts with there's always a market for illegal mining and the minerals that they've been mining. It goes back to the formal trade. So now the problem is it's only illegal miners that are criminalized. So it all lies in government because it has been proven, and government must make means to engage with us, civil society, and most importantly, engage the actual Zamazamas on finding solutions on this.
Yeah, but Mr. Gilichana, also looking at what the role of mining operators are, especially if the mine, if they can't extract any more wealth or natural resources from it, whose responsibility is it to seal it off, rehabilitate it, and ensure that the surrounding communities benefit from it?
Thank you very much for the question. One, the mining industry is responsible for the closure of the mines. Once the mines are getting to the stage of being closed, the mining industry have to ensure that they follow the correct procedures and processes that are there in terms of the laws that are guiding the mining industry how to close the mine, so that we don't live with these abandoned mines that now most of these mines where these activities are happening are now unused mines. And these mines are also ownerless, which becomes a challenge. You say nobody says that no, those were owners by then, they have left already. Then that's why we say that also the government must come into play here. They must ensure that these mines are monitored and there's a proper sealing of those mines so that there's no easy access in those mines.
I think I agree with you, and the problem is obviously finding who is it that is responsible. And perhaps Mr. David van Wyk, who's on the line with us as a mining expert. David, we seem to have been having a problem there. We can't link up to him. But perhaps we come back to you, Sfiso. Whose responsibility is it to make sure that those mines, despite the fact that the miners are not there, we know they made the profits, we know they dug the stuff out of the ground. So now who has to take the responsibility to make sure that the rehabilitation takes place effectively?
At this moment in time, we have to ask ourselves who issues mining licenses.
Okay.
Then it's government, and for sure, when each and every mine has a lifespan, when the lifespan comes to close, it's government's duty to ensure that the mine is rehabilitated, properly rehabilitated, and mine closure certificate is issued, and then the responsibility of that mine comes back to government. And then in this instance, it's government who has failed, dismally failed in all the about 6,000 mines that haven't been rehabilitated, and it's communities that are living close to the mines that are bearing the brunt of living close to those mines.
Yeah.
Not long ago, a child was lost into a shaft. So even in Mpumalanga, you see unrehabilitated shaft that has been going on for years. And still, government is shying away from all the responsibilities.
Let's invite David van Wyk, a mining expert who joins us on the line. Good evening to you, David. And perhaps you can give us an indication if there is even a draft or a white paper on the subject of legalizing the so-called Zamazamas to ensure that those that used to draw and work in the mines can still extract some form of a livelihood.
Well, there is a unit in the Department of Mineral Resources that is a small-scale mining unit that is supposed to, pay attention to this kind of issue. But you see, the problem is that Zama Zama mining is micro mining. It is survival mining. It is not even small-scale mining. So it is basically people who come to Johannesburg and other mining areas and find themselves living in close proximity to abandoned mines and ownerless mines and derelict mines and so on, because that's the only land that's really available for them to settle on. But, the case of Gauteng is very different from the case of Welkom. In Gauteng, small-scale mining or Zama Zama mining is relatively easy because you've got incline shafts and they're sort of at a 25-degree angle. You can actually walk down them to get underground. The old incline shafts that were there from the early 19th century to the 1930s and so on. But in Welkom, the shafts are all vertical shafts. Now, for someone to get down Eland Mine, you have to go down the headgear with the cage. And how these workers got underground, the mine security must tell us, and the mine management must tell us. And it's not something that started after 1994. In Welkom, in the operational mines, even when my father was a mining engineer, there was a lot of smuggling of gold out of those mines in those days already. So that is not something new in the Welkom area. And so in the Welkom area, there would have to be a commission of inquiry, I would say, to investigate what is happening in those mines. Whether management is colluding with people underground, because these guys stay underground for 2-3 months. They get fed on a daily basis. They get paid an income, a wage at the end of every month, which is about 50% of what a normal mine worker earns. So there are big syndicates in the Welkom area that are operating these operations and so on, where this explosion went wrong now, and some 29 to 30 people lost their lives.
Now, looking at the socio-economic impact of this artisanal mining, we talk about how much is lost to the formal economy, but what in your view can be done if we benchmark it on best practices internationally to bring them into the main income or production stream?
Well, I think that, first of all, we would have to register all the sites where they are operating, and we would have to actually register all these guys and organize them into a formal business entity, whether it's a cooperative or a small enterprise, an SME enterprise. Now, the problem is that many of these guys are illiterate, because in our mining industry, we still only have a literacy rate of around 60%. Despite all the corporate social responsibility of the industry and so on, somehow they don't get people to be more literate than that. And that is a huge big problem. It's always been a huge big problem, and it is related to the fact that they use subcontractors and labor brokers and so on a large scale in South African mining, that they can't get a stable labor force that they can actually educate to be properly literate. So when people get retrenched and other generations of people follow them, you must remember that people have been coming into South Africa from Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Lesotho and these places over generations. Stimela, they came with the train. And so this is the latest generation coming in, but it's coming into areas where industrial mining is in decline. Now, for gold, definitely, industrial mining is in decline. It's no longer profitable for big industrial mines in the Johannesburg area to operate these mines. But they might be viable for medium, small, and micro mining. And so we need to begin to set in place the mechanisms to make a transition, an orderly transition into micro, medium, and small-scale mining.
Well, thank you very much, David. But, as David is explaining the technical, intricacies into this difficult situation that we find ourselves in, with high unemployment, with the slow economic growth that we have in the country, it becomes very difficult, unfortunately, to sort of curb the issue very quickly. And I heard you earlier on, Sifiso, referring to the fact that it's government responsibility to make sure that he's talking about security, he's talking about legalizing it and making sure that we create a space for small micro miners. Obviously, even in its illegal form, there are people who are making money out of it. The question is, how are those people making money out of it, and who are they selling their deposits of those mines that they're getting from, and who is actually purchasing from them? Does anybody have an answer for that?
Unfortunately, as I said before, that it all ends up in the formal sector. I mean, if I can make an example, in Zambia, when a copper from illegal miners had to be tracked down, it ended up in the Glencore smelters. So surely in South Africa, I mean, the Hawks are busy celebrating that they are closing down on illegal miners, but that's not the truth, because it's only the tip of the iceberg. The real issue here is closing down on the kingpins, closing down on where these formal mining companies get the deposits, as you are saying, because that in one way or the other is perpetuating these zamazamas, and no one seems to be taking responsibility what happens after that. And it's only when lives are lost that we know about the zamazamas. Right now, we don't know how many zamazamas are underground.
But you would probably be more understanding as NUM with what David was talking about these employees and how they get acquired. For example, you hear about him talking about labor brokers, and we know unions have been very much against having labor brokers. How much more do they add fuel to the fire when it comes to them facilitating these kind of operations and making them legit?
No, I wouldn't say labor brokers could be compared with illegal mining, because they are doing legal processes. They hire people as much as we are saying done with labor brokers, because they are paying slavery salaries.
What happens to those people when they lose jobs?
When they lose jobs, yes, they will go for illegal mining. They will go for illegal mining because that's where they will get money. Also, I will differ a bit with David on the issue of focusing on small-scale miners, because the shafts where these people have been retrieved, that is not a small-scale mine. This is not also for the first time. In 2009, we were there in 2009, where about 85 bodies were retrieved in the very same mine. We were there in 2009. Now, it is repeating itself. What lessons is the industry learning? What lessons also is DMR learning? Yes, I know that there's a process that is a stakeholder engagement on the issues of dealing with these illegal miners. That is why we are calling for the regulation of these illegal miners, so that you know exactly who are you dealing with. You know, because right now you don't know. You arrest the full soldier, but you don't deal with the whole supply chain. That is why I say that once you are regulated, you are able to coordinate, and that will also pay back to the GDP of the country.
Right, okay, let's go back to David. David van Wyk, he's a mining expert. David, you've heard the comments from studio here. You hear the comments from NUM as well. Would you say that perhaps the issue lies in making sure that the government plays its role in part of the DMR to make sure that the mines that are actually supposed to be rehabilitated are done so appropriately, because they're the ones that actually issue the licenses? But most importantly, how do we bring down these kingpins that you're referring to that are actually making sure that this becomes a lucrative business?
Well, I think, first of all, in Welkom, the NUM comrade that spoke before me is absolutely correct. That is a formal industrial mine. And in that mine, the government needs to investigate how did these workers get underground in the first place in that mine, when there's only one way down. And food gets taken down to them every day, and the gold that they mine comes into the formal system and into the formal refineries and so on. So I would suggest a commission of inquiry around those kinds of mines, those very deep mines that have vertical shafts and so on. But on the other hand, you know, in Zimbabwe, the government created a central buying agency for all the gold that small-scale miners produce. And then they registered all the small-scale miners and organized them into cooperatives. Now, in the diamond mining sector in Zimbabwe, it was chaotic. But in gold and other minerals, it is less chaotic, and it's far more structured and formalized. And the level of gold that came in to the formal system was now actually measurable and therefore controllable. We must also look at something else, the issue of industrial mining in this country and invoice fraud. Because it is through invoice fraud that you get the illegal gold into the legal system. You know, the United Nations Council for Development, UNCTAD, did a study last year, which the Chamber of Mines rejected and which the Treasury rejected. But in actual fact, that study is very accurate with regard to invoice fraud. Because we find in Zambia, we find in Zimbabwe, DRC, and in South Africa, that mining companies actually lie about their capital expenditure. They lie about the grade of the ore that they take out, all to avoid tax and to pay less tax inside the country, and to try and maximize their profits. I mean, with the Farlam Commission, we saw that with Lonmin and Platinum. You know, the issue of tax havens and so on as well comes into play in this particular thing. Now, if your formal mining system is rotten, then you are going to create space for syndicates and so on. And the formal mining system didn't start in 1994. It started long before 1994. You know, if we go back into the archives of newspapers and so on, we note that people were actually taking gold out of the formal industrial mines even in those days. You know, and when people were arrested, even in Welkom, people that were arrested, they were not just people who were from the township and so on. They were people from the suburbs and so on as well. And if you look at the recent killing of people on the East Rand and so on, we know that the people that are involved there in smuggling that gold are middle-class people who have never been underground in their lives.
All right, but if we know so much, please stay on the line, Mr. Van Wyk, Mr. Gilichana. As a stakeholder, key material stakeholder in the whole value chain, a National Union of Mine Workers, what is it that you're engaging the Department of Mineral Resources in dealing with this issue sustainably and to ensure that there is no further loss of life?
In dealing with DMR, that's why we're calling for the regulation of the illegal miners, 1. 2, it is very difficult, even with our shop stewards. When you talk about it in a mass meeting, as you move out of the mass meeting, you get an anonymous call. Who are you? Do you own a mine? Therefore,
so you're saying that there's victimization every time you raise issues?
It becomes very difficult for us to go in public and talk about illegal mining, because you don't know who's behind you and you don't know how those people get your number just minutes after we have spoken about it. That is why we said this matter must be handled by the security cluster, people who are competent enough to handle it. We have to take our foot back on the matter. As much as we are deeply concerned, we are calling for the employers also to put measures and controls so that this does not affect the permanent employees who are working there, because activities are happening in some of the areas that have already worked before, can have an impact to the people who are working permanently in the active working places.
That's quite interesting indeed. So obviously what Mr. Gilichana is trying to say is that it's a sensitive issue that even they as a union have a struggle to address. So now the question is, who's profiting and why? Why would DMR allow this kind of corruption? Because that's what it is, to be honest. Why would they allow this kind of corruption to continue as they issue out licenses and put people into even more danger than what they were before the mining licenses were issued?
I would certainly say just because there's political will for mining to go on and it's benefiting the country, it's only seen where benefits are. But the victims, especially communities that are hosting mining, we hardly hear about them. And DMR has proven time and time again to be incompetent to be regulating mining in the country. So we cannot only look at illegal mining or zamazamas. The whole industry is in shambles.
That's very scary to be said. Do you agree with those sentiments, David?
Well, yes, I certainly do agree with those sentiments. And I think that, when Marikana happened, there should have been a commission of inquiry into mining as a whole, not into the massacre per se. And I think that the focus was completely wrong in that particular instance. And I also think that, the fact of the matter is that, it is much cheaper for the bosses to have a bunch of illegal guys underground for 3 months that you pay half the wages that you pay the NUM and other union guys. And these guys don't get pension, they don't have medical aid, they don't have any of the expenditure associated with the formal mine workers. And I heard someone not too long ago, about 3 years ago, at the Human Rights Commission. We were talking about small-scale mining there. And someone from the Chamber of Mines said it's much cheaper to mine the way that they mine in the Congo, where they use people's children and families and so on, who are not unionized, who do not get formal wages and so on, than what it is to mine in a formal way. So there's a big danger for the workers of this country that the industry actually would like mining to become very relaxed, very informal, so that workers do not have the rights and so on that they enjoyed as a result of years and years of worker struggle in this country.
But David,
and that's
what do we learn? What do we learn from the Australian miners, the Chilean miners, and the Chinese miners, because they're far more robust, they're far more technical when it comes to addressing illegal mining? What can we learn from them that we can apply in this emerging market of ours in South Africa?
Well, first of all, we can learn from Australia that we do not need to pay workers slave wages for them to be productive. Australian mine worker gets about a factor of almost 20 times more than a South African mine worker. Australian mine worker doesn't live in a squatter camp. Australian mine worker lives in a proper house. Australian mine worker gets flown to the outback for 7 days, and then he has 7 days off. Flown back 7 days, 7 days off. When he's at the mine site, he has a proper accommodation with a kitchen, with a stove, with bedrooms, television, and everything there for him. In South Africa, mine workers only get off when it's public holidays, right? They're not 7 days on, 7 days. Now, Australia started mining the same time as South Africa. How come South Africa is so far behind? When it comes to the issues of labor, when it comes to the issue of controlling the industry and so on. And that is because people are plundering when they are in Africa. They misbehave when they are on this continent. They behave very differently in Canada. They behave very differently in Australia. They behave very differently in Europe than what they behave in Africa.
So that it's a small haven, if you will, for non-compliance and companies getting away with impunity. But while we discuss all of this, there's also the issue of retribution, because there are families who are distraught, having lost breadwinners, and nothing, there's no recourse for them. But that's where we're going to have to leave it, unfortunately. Hopefully we'll have an opportunity to expand on this. We are speaking to Eric Gilichane, who is the National Union of Mine Workers Health and Safety Secretary. Sfiso Dladla is Mining and Extractives Project Manager at Action Aid, and David van Wyk, a mining expert, joining us on the line. That's where we'll leave it for the moment. Now, coming up at 7 p.m. tonight, join the primetime